Look closely. On July 20th, 1969, a billion people stopped their lives to watch an event that, we assert, was the greatest theatrical triumph of the 20th century. Not a scientific achievement, but a masterpiece of propaganda. They say it was one small step for man. We say it was one giant lie for the American government. Every single piece of photographic and video evidence presented to the public is a forgery. The mission was a lie. The triumph was a lie. We are going to expose every single fatal flaw in their stage production. The $30 billion question is, who was really running the camera? Let's start with the motive. The context is non-negotiable. The Cold War. The space race wasn't about science. It was about global dominance and nuclear superiority. The Soviets launched Sputnik. They sent Yuri Gagarin into orbit first. America was being humiliated on the global stage. In 1961, President Kennedy made an impossible, stone-cold promise. Land a man on the moon and return him safely before the decade is out. 8 years. The technology was not there. The early failures, like the Apollo 1 fire that incinerated 3 astronauts, proved the entire system was a death trap. The risk was too high. The embarrassment of a televised failure on the moon would have been catastrophic. The government had painted itself into a corner. How do you meet an impossible deadline with impossible technology? You don't. You fake it. You create a successful narrative. The $30 billion budget wasn't for the rocket program. That was the budget for the secrecy, the payoffs, and the elaborate film production needed to sell the lie to the entire world. They couldn't afford to risk global embarrassment. They could afford a guaranteed cinematic victory. Forget the flags for a moment. Forget the shadows. The real, undisputed scientific impossibility that proves the hoax is the Van Allen radiation belts. These 2 massive bands of high-energy, highly charged particles surround the Earth. Every mission to the moon has to pass directly through them. NASA claims their astronauts were inside for mere hours and had negligible exposure. This is a scientific absurdity. The shielding on the Apollo capsules was thin aluminum. It would have been like a paper bag against a shotgun. We were talking about levels of radiation, specifically the highly penetrating proton radiation that should have instantly caused severe radiation sickness, organ failure, and almost certain death for the astronauts. To survive, they would have needed a lead-line bunker hundreds of pounds heavy. They didn't have it. The technology to protect humans from that kind of cosmic battering simply didn't exist in the 1960s. They only survived the journey because they never made the journey. They went to low Earth orbit, filmed the scenes, and waited for the world to cheer their safe return. If you're going to pull off a lie this big, you don't use government hacks. You hire the best illusionist in the world. Stanley Kubrick was the man. He had just demonstrated an absolute mastery of creating realistic, zero-gravity environments in 2001, A Space Odyssey. His techniques were years ahead of his time. He was known for demanding absolute secrecy and for being a tyrannical perfectionist, the perfect man to run the most classified film set in history. This is a lesson in high school physics that NASA failed. With the sun being the only extremely distant light source, all shadows on the moon should be perfectly parallel. There should be no deviation. But look at the evidence. In virtually every photograph, the shadows are inconsistent. They diverge, they converge, and they cast different lengths. Look at the lunar module's shadow compared to a nearby rock. They are at entirely different angles. What does this mean? It means the scene was lit by multiple sources: studio spotlights, fill lights, and floodlights. All the equipment needed to balance the lighting on a set piece. They had to use artificial lighting to illuminate the astronauts and the equipment against the bright lunar surface. That necessity created this fatal flaw. Shadow angles that proved the light source was nearby and multiple, not a single star 93 million miles away. Step outside on the moon. With no atmosphere, no clouds, and no light pollution, the sky should be absolutely blindingly full of stars. It should be a constant, overwhelming canvas of cosmic light. But every photo, pitch black, a void, an empty backdrop. NASA claims the camera exposure had to be set so fast for the bright foreground. the lunar surface, that the faint stars didn't register. Nonsense. This is the moon, not downtown Manhattan. The light sources are different. The real reason is that the conspirators couldn't risk the chance that an astronomer, a PhD from an adversarial country, would notice that the star positions were wrong. To accurately map the star field for the specific time and location of a landing was an astronomical risk they refused to take. The simple black curtain was the safest option for their forgery. We believe the landing was filmed on a top-secret set in the Nevada desert or at a heavily secured facility like Area 51. Kubrick could recreate the light, the shadows, and the unique movement of low gravity. And if you look at his later films, like The Shining, they are riddled with veiled confessions. The Apollo 11 sweater, the key patterns, the room number 237. The average Earth-Moon distance is approximately 238,000 miles. He was a brilliant artist who wanted his audience to find the truth he was forced to hide. Here is the lie they tried to sell us as a symbol of American triumph. The flag, waving in the wind. The moon is a vacuum. There is no air, no atmosphere, and therefore no wind. Yet, in the most famous photographs, the flag is not only unfurled, they admit to using a rod for that. It is wrinkled, bunched up, and rippling, as if it is suspended in a breeze. They claim the wrinkles are from being folded in storage. But watch the video footage. The flag moves after being planted. It settles, it jitters, it exhibits behavior only possible with external air resistance. This is the simplest, most glaring, undeniable failure of the set design. They wanted a heroic shot, and they clumsily forgot the first law of physics in a vacuum. Every piece of evidence they provided was on film, captured by a Hasselblad camera with an etched glass plate. This plate had reference crosshairs that, theoretically, should appear on top of everything in the image. But what do we see? In numerous images, the white crosshairs are mysteriously disappearing behind objects, behind the astronauts' equipment, behind the lunar module, behind rocks. This is definitive, technical proof that the images are composites. They were doctored in a lab. Someone was cutting, pasting, and layering objects onto a forged background after the picture was taken, and they were sloppy enough to cover their own reference markers. This is the smoking gun of photo manipulation. The producers of this spectacle had a limited budget for their set design, and when you look closely, you see the cheap corners they cut. Photos from supposedly different stages of the missions, different locations, even different missions, feature identical background hills and mountains. They simply moved the camera and the foreground elements around the set and relied on the low-quality broadcast of the 1960s to mask the reuse of the scenery. The whole lunar landscape was just a limited matte painting backdrop. Furthermore, the horizon looks unnaturally close, as if the set was built on a slightly curved, confined stage. The vast, infinite space of the moon was confined to a very small studio. A 10,000-pound thrust engine, even throttled down to land, is a violent force of nature. Landing the lunar module should have caused massive scouring of the fine lunar regolith, creating a huge blast crater and kicking up dust for miles around. Yet, the footpads of the Eagle are clean. The dust beneath the engine is undisturbed. The footprints are right next to the lander. Impossible. This can only mean the lander was not under thrust. It was lowered by a massive crane onto the set piece to simulate a gentle landing. The conspirators knew the violent dispersal of dust would have been impossible to fake convincingly on film, so they simply eliminated the problem by having the landing module arrive gently, like a puppet on a string. If the mission was a triumph, why did NASA erase and destroy the original telemetry tapes? The high-resolution original footage of the moon landing is officially lost. They claim they simply recorded over them to save money. This is the greatest technological cover-up in history. You don't record over the most important, expensive footage your government has ever captured. You destroy evidence when you have something to hide. And what about the astronauts? They returned as heroes, but they were never the same. Their behavior was often erratic, guarded, and cold. Were they traumatized by space? Or were they burdened by the secret of the century? The pressure on them to maintain the lie, for 50 years has to be the most intense psychological operation ever conceived. We're told the Soviets would have exposed the lie, but that assumes the USSR was a pure adversary. What if they were an accomplice? What if they recognized the extreme danger of that Van Allen radiation and realized both superpowers were technically incapable of making the trip safely? A secret pact ensures that America gets its propaganda win, and the Soviets quietly avoid a catastrophic failure of their own. Global powers conspire for mutual stability, and the physical evidence. The 382 kilograms of lunar samples? Scientists were fooled, yes. But those rocks could be Antarctic meteorites, which are readily available and known to be of lunar origin. Or they were highly advanced, synthetically created materials made in a top-secret lab. The U.S. military had the resources to fool the geology world. The moon rocks are merely the ultimate physical prop in this grand illusion. We have spent a full hour dissecting the evidence. The Van Allen belts made the journey deadly. The flapping flag proves air resistance was present. The diverging shadows prove multiple spotlights. The missing stars prove a black backdrop. The clean lander proves it was lowered by a crane. You have seen the contradictions within their own photographic proof. You have seen the scientific absurdities. The official story is held together by the thin thread of government trust. But when the evidence unravels, the only conclusion is that they couldn't go, so they faked it. I'm not asking you to take my word for it. I'm asking you to use your own eyes and apply simple logic to the images they gave us. The greatest achievement of the 20th century was nothing more than a desperate, brilliantly executed conspiracy. They won the Cold War with a movie. They lied to the world. The moon is still waiting for its first human visitor. The time to wake up is now. Question everything.